Hi, Rod Fleming here. How are you doing? Right, we're going to talk about transgender again today, transsexualism, and we've already discussed autogynephilic transgenders, who are very complex and were not understood until Ray Blanchard's work of the 1980s. Although they had been identified as a group, nobody really knew why they were doing what they do. Now we're going to talk today about the other group, which was understood much earlier. It was understood very early on. And they're called HomoSexual Transsexuals, or HSTS. Sometimes they call themselves trans kids, but I'm going to use the term HSTS because trans kid doesn't actually mean very much to someone who isn't a trans kid, you know. So we're going to keep it with this, HSTS. Before we look at them, we're going to have a quick look at characteristics that have been found in common within the group of feminine gay men. Now, there are debates about to what extent all gay men are feminine, but there is a group within them who are clearly feminine, or more feminine than the average for males. And this group tends to be smaller, lighter, somewhat more neotenous. They tend to be, often they think of it as being good looking, but they actually retain youthful features longer than other men. And these characteristics have long been noted, and this group of characteristics constitute one of the reasons why people think there's something innate going on. Now, you haven't actually identified what the innate factor is, whether it's genetic or perinatal or something like that, but that there's something innate making these people both different physiologically from the group of men in their ethnicity and family, and in terms of their sexual desires, their orientation. Now, homosexual transsexuals are like that, but more so. They are extreme variants. If you think of a scale of variation, and you start with feminine homosexual men, your classic gay guy at one end. At the other end, you have a homosexual transsexual trans woman, a beautiful trans woman who happened to be born male. And she will take all of the things that I've just discussed, but it will be much more pronounced. She'll be much noticeably more petite, fine-boned, small for her build, delicately featured. Her speech will be noticeably feminine, and none of this is learned. It's all innate. Maybe the speech is somewhat conditioned, but you can't learn the fact that a person of normal hand size, I have a size 8 hand, which is not big. I mean, most of the HSTS I know, they're very tiny people, and I can do this, and put my thumb and middle finger round their wrist. Right? You do it on a normal sized guy, and I think that shows you what I'm talking about here. I mean, you're talking about tiny, tiny people. The fact that these factors tend to be found again in conjunction with their extreme level of attraction for men. This looks innate. We'll talk about great brain scans and things like that in a moment. Now, the other thing to be aware of regarding homosexual transsexuals is that they're very sexy. And this is somewhat played down in literature because I think people get prurient about it. It's very strange. Mike Bailey, in his excellent book, The Man Who Would Be Queen, which actually explains Ray Blanchard's theories in a popularly accessible manner, that most of the work is not Mike's. He's just relating Ray's work. He says that, he quotes someone else as saying that homosexual transsexuals are boy crazy. Well, they're not boy crazy. They just aren't. What they are is dick crazy. They are obsessed with it. And these are people who can't get to sleep at night for imagining boatloads of big, hairy, masculine, sweaty men charging up their door, breaking it down and ravishing them. I'm not joking. I am serious about this. They are very, very sexually driven people. And it does seem to me, from knowing quite a few, that the more sexually motivated they are, the more feminine they are. I mean, there seems to be a direct correlation. And whether this is a strange function of testosterone, because it's like this. Look, their orientation is female. They want to have sex with men, and they want to have sex with men in the way that a woman does. That is, they want to submit. They want to be penetrated. Okay, so that they're always what they call bottoms. This group are almost never so-called tops. We can discuss them later. So their natural desire for men is exactly like a woman's desire. Blanchard described this as well. It's their desire for men is exactly the same as a woman's desire for a man's body. And what they want a man to do with his body is exactly what a heteronormative woman will want to do. Want a man's body to do to her. You know, penetrate her, take her, dominate her. All of these things, these are all very much part of the desire that they have for men. They tend to be attracted very strongly to older men who are bigger, very masculine. Okay? But the other part of sexuality, or one other part of sexuality, is libido. And libido is not strictly correlated with orientation. I mean, you can be heterosexual but not have a very big sex drive. And similarly, you can be homosexual and not have a very big sex drive. However, men do tend to have a more powerful sex drive than women. I mean, there are plenty sexy women out there. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that on average, men tend to be more sexually motivated than women do. So their libido is stronger. And the analogy I like to use is that, you know, if a woman, or even a very sexy woman, has got a 2-litre sports car engine under the hood, homosexuals have got a V6, you know. It's much bigger and it's much more powerful. Homosexual transsexuals, they've got a V8, right? I mean, this is a 6-litre monster under the hood. It's extremely powerful. And this incredibly powerful sexual motivation, in conjunction with their orientation towards men and wanting to be taken by men, propels them along this path of femininity, right? That's what stimulates their transition. Because after all, when you think about it, transitioning is a very unusual thing to do. Think about it. You know, they're not talking about something that exists only in, you know, modern politically correct cultures where there's a great deal of so-called gender fluidity. This happens in extremely conservative cultures. A good example would be the Philippines and South America, Southeast Asia generally. But it also goes back to the earliest records that we have. There's nothing new about this phenomenon. This is a long-established, well-known phenomenon. So it does appear that the more powerful the libido in a homosexual transsexual, the more likely she is to be a girl, you know. And at the same time, the more likely she is to have these physiological features that I've talked about, being small, light, neotenous and all the rest of it. It does look very much as if there's something, this is not about conditioning or socialization or anything at all like that. I mean, many of the superficial factors might be socialized in, but the basis is obviously innate. Otherwise you wouldn't have this correlation with the physiology. So these are very powerfully sexual people. The next thing to notice about homosexual transsexuals is that although they will transition fully, I mean, they will have genital reconstruction surgery. That is what some people call a sex change, sometimes it's called SRS. These are misleading terms because you can't change your sex. That is fixed at the moment of conception. You're either XY or XX. And these are all XY. So we're talking about homosexual transsexuals, a group of people who are born male, but who have a female sexual desire for men, associated with a very powerful libido. And I would argue that the more powerful the libido, the more likely it is that they will appear as transsexual, that they'll transition. Because if you think about it, transitioning is it's an odd thing to do. We're not talking about this happening only in, you know, modern so-called liberal cultures where there's a certain amount of gender fluidity. This happens in very traditional conservative cultures. It happens in cultures where it's very difficult for people to transition. So it has to be a very powerful stimulus that will cause them to do it. It's not an easy thing to do. And they may well suffer considerable disadvantages in terms of their lives from doing it. Careers might be blocked to them. They may have problems in their family. It's very typical for younger HSTS to suffer serious abuse at the hands of their family, particularly their fathers, who will often attempt to force them to become more masculine. For example, Kevin Ballett, a very well-known Filipina, Transpini model, a very, very beautiful woman. She was chained up like a dog in her father's courtyard when she was a child. She was beaten relentlessly. And he's quite open that he did this, but now that she makes lots of money, he accepts her, which is unfortunately very typical of the Southeast Asian experience. And I certainly know an awful lot of girls who went through experiences which are they're distressing. It's very distressing to hear what they went through as children. Because remember, an HSTS, one of the characteristics of an HSTS is that they are likely to have exhibited gender non-conforming behaviour as children. Okay, so they'll have liked to wear their mum's dresses, maybe her mum's high heels, but it won't be just a sort of passing casual interest in a little bit of role playing, which all boys do, by the way. That's perfectly normal. It'll be something much more intense and much more prolonged, which goes on over a period of years and maybe gets more intense. They might want to have to call themselves a girl name or something like that. It's not always the case with everyone, but there will be some people will remark. People around them will remark. They'll go, "That's a very girly boy," or "Your son looks like a girl," and doesn't mean just features, but the way they're behaving. They'll get called sissy at school, and get bullied at school. There's a whole bunch of things that will happen. So you know, being transsexual is not an easy choice, and homosexual transsexuals have to be very motivated to do it. And this is more the case because most HSTS are not really very pushy people. They tend to be quite gentle people, they're surprisingly so, and they're not aggressive in the way that you would find many AGPs are. Aggressivity in them is because they're basically men. They are not really women at all. They have a condition that makes them fetishize the thought of being women, but they're not actually women. And there's an argument here that actually HSTS are behaving in a much more feminine way. They tend to be more compliant. They tend to be much more agreeable than would be expected for males. You know, we'll go along with that. They try to go along, try to keep everybody happy. They try to be nice people. So it's very hard for them to insist, you know, that, look, I'm a girl, I'm just going to do this. So the motivation has to be really, really powerful. And it seems to have to do with this turbocharged libido that they have, that they're so strongly attracted to men. There's clearly a behavioural link between attraction to men and this adoption of feminine gender characteristics. It's obvious that there must be a link of some kind. This link is innate because there's just too much evidence showing that even homosexual men, that is ones who are they're not transsexual, these are people who present as men, still tend to show feminine gender traits. Okay? And this just gets more extreme. Think everything about, you know, a gay guy is just 100 times more so in an HSTS, basically. It's just, I've sometimes called them, they're girls on steroids. And that's exactly what they are, because they still have testosterone going on. So that their presentation is girly, but it's powered by this really, really big, grunty sexual motor that they have. It dominates everything, it devastates everything around them. If you're seeking a relationship with a transsexual, transgender person, and you're a man, you're looking for a trans woman, I would counsel you that, I would warn you that HSTS will be extremely sexually demanding. I mean, it'll be great, it'll be really good fun, but if you're the kind of guy who likes sex once a week, this is not a good match for you. She's going to want it 2 or 3 times a day, you know? That's what I'm talking about here. So do be aware of that you have to kind of match your own physical desires for sex to what hers are, because hers will be off the scale. She will, anytime, anywhere, let's do it. It's like that with an HSTS. They are very, very powerfully motivated to have sex. As we've said, they tend to be petite and pretty. The AGPs, if they transition young, which you see in Asia quite a lot, in fact a very great deal, tend to be statuesque and beautiful. You know, long legs, quite pronounced features, can be very beautiful. They start hormones in Thailand at 12, 14, you know, Philippines at 16, a little bit low because the pharmacists are a bit more fussy. AGPs can be extremely beautiful, and I certainly know autogynephilic trans women from both Philippines and Thailand who are really stunning, gorgeous, gorgeous women, just supermodels. HSTS can often be extremely pretty, but they tend not to be quite as striking because they're small, and it's all girl-sized. If you put them beside women, natal women, that's people born with vaginas, of their own ethnicity, of their own population, they'll appear to be a little bit bigger. But then you put the autogynephiles beside them, they're huge. They're just exactly the same size as the men in the population, right? So it's like HSTS are kind of like bigger girls, bigger versions of the girls. You know, they look really girly, but they're just a little bit bigger. They'll have slightly longer legs, maybe slightly broader shoulders. Occasionally you'll find that they can have slightly masculine features, like perhaps a pronounced brow ridge, but that tends to come from the fact that they self-medicate. You know, in Asia they're not getting prescription medication, so it's very inconsistent, and sometimes it's just what they can get, you know. Usually birth control pills. In the West it's slightly different. I think that what I would say is this: look, if you're HSTS, young HSTS in Philippines or Asia, okay, and you're going to be able to just buy cheap birth control pills for what? $1 a strip, $1 for 21 pills, €1 say, and that's going to be easy for you. The micro pills are called, or there's a few other brands, similar sort of price. It's not a big dose of estrogen, but because these people are already so feminine, you know, they're small, light, tiny bones, pretty faces, all the rest of it, it's enough, you know, because it gives them that female bloom to their skin, smooths it out. It will cause them to grow boobs. It's quite surprising, actually, how quickly an HSTS will develop boobs just under birth control pills, whereas an AGP will need heavy doses of estrogen plus a T blocker to do the same thing. I've seen HSTS with gorgeous bodies, really feminine bodies, and they say, oh, all I ever took was birth control pills. It's all I could ever afford, you know. In the West, you're going to go to a doctor, it's going to be much more controlled, you'll get blood tests, you'll get all that sort of thing. It is in many ways a much more controlled and sometimes better understood pathway into transsexualism. You have to be a little bit careful because not all doctors really know what they're talking about here, unfortunately. They should really refer you to a good specialist. In Asia, your source of expertise will be the people around you, which brings me to another point. When HSTS in the West grow up, they tend to be isolated. And as I said earlier, they might be bullied at school. They'll probably be shunned at school. If there are other people like them at school, they'll avoid each other, right? Because being together will make them a bigger target. So they tend not to be in situations where they can share their childhood experiences with other people and say, oh yeah, well, you know, I feel the same way. So they become quite isolated from society, and that's something that they carry on into adult life in the West. In Asia, that's not what happens. In Asia, because it's a true two-group society, I'll do another video on this, and the home group is a matriarchy. That is, it's run by the women, the mothers, and well, actually the grandmothers. There is a role for gender non-conforming children. I mean, they go, yeah, well, you're gay, that's okay, that's fine, you can help with washing the clothes. No, and you won't ever have the status that a woman would have because you can't have children, but you will have a life path. There will be things that you can do. You'll be a hairdresser, you could be a a dancer, you could work in cabaret, you could be a beautician, you could be a seamstress, clothes designer, you could be a cook. A lot of them work as chefs and work in restauration. In modern times, you can work, in the Philippines particularly, you can work in the call centre, because anywhere you're not seen by the public, that's fine. You know, it's that kind of society. So there are jobs that you'll be allowed to do. You would not be allowed to be, it would be very difficult for you, rather, to be a lawyer, an engineer, a brain surgeon, that sort of thing. No, that's going to be real difficult. Much more difficult than it would be for anyone else, believe me. But there still will be things that you can go and do. If you go to any salon in Thailand or the Philippines, Vietnam, any of these countries, they're just full. They're full of transgenders. And a lot of them will be HSTS. You'll see the HSTS right away, because they're the wee ones. They're the tiny little ones like this. You know, and you think, how can a human be that small? You know, somebody born male, how could you be that small? It's absolutely, and they're, like I said, they're tiny, tiny, tiny fine bones. So what happens in the West is that they tend to be, as I say, they tend to be very secretive, and that will continue into their later life. When you look at the situation in the West, you find you're always talking to AGPs. It's very rare that someone like Blair White, bless her, comes along. You know, I mean, what a lovely person to start with. She's just a peach. But she's rare. Very few HSTS will stand up in the firing line the way she does. Most of them in the West have been indoctrinated into believing that the best thing they can possibly do is keep it a secret. Just don't tell anybody what's going on. And so what that leads you to, you see, and this is really quite important, is that AGPs tend to have GRS. They will be the kind of AGP who has what's called anatomic autogynephilia, and maybe physiological as well. They're really obsessed with the idea of having a female body. And they come to loathe their penises because it's not part of a female body. Look in the mirror and go, what's that thing? What is that thing doing there? You know, and there's plenty of quotes online and YouTube of AGPs saying that, how could I feel like a woman when that thing hanging between my legs? And HSTS doesn't have that feeling. She doesn't feel that way. She feels like a girl because she wants men. You know, and she knows what the men are going to do with her. You know, she knows what she wants to happen. She's not stupid, and she knows which bit of her body she's going to use and what she's going to do with it, and what she wants a man to put in it, right? It's very clear in her mind. And that for her is that's what makes her a girl, you know, her desire for men. HSTS tend to, most HSTS are, yeah, they really do like their penises. They have an awful lot of fun with their penises, you know. They'd be very unlikely to be happy about penetrating a partner with their penis, but yeah, you play with it all you like, they'll be very happy. So if they have GRS, it's genital reconstruction surgery to remove the penis and turn it into a cosmetic vagina. They have it for other reasons, and the reasons are always social, right? They might think, particularly in the West, that this might make it easier for them to land the life mate, the life partner, you know, the man who's going to look after them all of their lives, because these girls have some very stereotypical ideas about male-female relationships, okay? And they want to be, you know, that girl. So they're looking for the guy who's going to look after them for the rest of their lives, stick out with them, give them all the happiness and the memories, and they can't have kids, but they'll have legions of pups, you know. I mean, as I've said before, try and keep it down to Shih Tzus and maybe some bunnies, because the list of bizarre and wonderful pets that can get right out of hand, because you're trying to assuage her motherhood instinct, which she can't do anything about. She will adopt, if you have kids, she'll just adopt them. She'll just adopt your kids, and she'll be their mum, you know. And she'll be a good mum. She'll be a very good mum to your kids. But that's a purpose for changing, you know, because they go, well, what kind of man like that would want a person with a penis? So I have to get rid of the penis. Another thing would be, for example, because I say they'll be keeping this secret. The typical pathway for a Western HSTS is to do a thing called woodworking and live in deep stealth. That is, they'll move to a new town, they'll sever all their ties with their old friends and their family, and they'll appear as a woman in their new place, right? That's it. I'm a woman. And they don't tell anyone that they were once boys. And because they're so passable as women, nobody asks. Hence the issue with finding the guy, you know. But then there's the other thing. What do we do if we go to the beach? You know, because HSTS often have quite a lot to hide, you know. And how do you hide that? The typical trick in Asia, by the way, is to wear to tape it and then wear 2 sets of bikini bottoms, and that kind of holds everything in place. But there's still the risk that, you know, if you're frolicking about in the surf, you know, it's always going to pop out. And if you've spent years of your life developing a persona in a new community where they don't know that you were born male, then you could see your life destroyed, totally ruined, absolutely lose your job in the United States, lose your job, lose your home, lose all your friends, because they go, you've been lying to us, you know. So that's another reason why an HSTS will look at genital reconstruction surgery. HSTS, when they feel dysphoria, which is the discomfort associated with appearing in the gender that is conforming to your birth sex, okay, they don't feel it the way that an AGP does. They don't feel this, oh, I hate my penis, the hatred for parts of their body. They don't have that kind of self-loathing, which is a really big part of the AGP profile. For them, it's social discomfort. For HSTS, it's a social discomfort. They're in part worried about discovery, worried about fitting in, worried about, you know, being in a bikini and everybody keeps looking at their pants, you know, because they're going, what's that bulge? Which is understandable. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. It's like, yeah, okay, I can get it. Especially if you've lived that way. And that's one of the reasons why HSTS are really so invisible in the West, is that it's partly because they just make such beautiful women that nobody clicks it. They go, you know, they don't get it. But it's also because they go to incredible lengths to hide. You know, an AGP can't hide. An AGP cannot hide, either in Asia or in the West. AGPs simply can't hide. They're too obvious. They're too big. They're too masculine. They're going to be outed, right? So, if you've started young, like an AGP would in Asia, even 14-year-old, 12-year-old, something like that, starting to take hormones, by the time you're 21, you might be a very tall, but probably very glamorous woman. Flaunt it, baby. You know, and that's what you see. You walk down Walking Street and you'll see, you know, 6-foot Amazons with backsides that are this wide. I'm not joking. You think I'm kidding. I'm not joking. That's what an AGP will do. But an HSTS, they just aren't like that. They'll vanish. They'll just kind of disappear. And particularly in the West, it's really very hard to meet HSTS in order to interview and discuss their life with them, because they hide. They're conditioned that the best protective mechanism that they can have in the West is to hide. Right? They don't get involved with the LGBT groups. They don't get involved with gays. If they get involved with other trans people, typically they'll go to 1 or 2 meetings and then they'll go, don't want to know about that, because the others are all AGPs. For an HSTS in the West, traditionally, it's maybe changing a little bit now, but traditionally the best solution, the best defence of all, was secrecy. Vanish. And that's one of the reasons why they are so concerned about the feminising of their bodies, and particularly of the genitalia. Have nice boobs and a pair of genitalia and a feminine looking genitalia, and nobody's going to think twice, you know. And today, some of the product from surgeons in Thailand particularly is really, really convincing. Some isn't, but some is. And if you get what you pay for, you know. And a girl who's had an operator, the HSTS, who's had this, is going to be, well, she's going to be hard for even the trained eye to spot, unless they're doing a very, very close examination. Indeed.